So today we are talking about the properties of nucleic acids. We'll be discussing about how DNA and RNA behaves in acidic solutions, how DNA and RNA behave in basic solutions, what happens to the DNA solution if you heat it, how to measure the density of a biomolecule, and at what wavelength the DNA and RNA molecules give us the property of absorption. So topic for today is chemical and physical properties of nucleic acids. So the first property that we are discussing here is absorption. This property is the property given by the aromatic bases, the nitrogenous bases, which are one of the components of the nucleic acid molecules. These aromatic bases, they absorb ultraviolet light at a wavelength of 260 nanometers. Now this property of absorption can be monitored using a spectrophotometer, and it can be used to figure out the concentration of nucleic acid in solution. It can be used to figure out the yield of nucleic acid in solution, and it is also used to figure out the purity of a nucleic acid. Now this property of absorption is because of the nitrogenous bases. So the free bases give us maximum absorption value. The single-stranded nucleic acids and the double-stranded DNA or RNA molecules, they will give us absorption value that will be lower than the value given by the free bases. The reason is that in a double-stranded DNA molecule, these bases are hydrogen bonded to each other, and the bases are not free to absorb ultraviolet light. When you convert a double-stranded DNA into single-stranded form, or you denature a native DNA molecule, the bases are not hydrogen bonded to each other, but still they are bonded to the sugar, and therefore the value of absorption increases when you compare it to a double-stranded DNA, but it will be lower than the value that is given by the nitrogenous bases. So if we have a double-stranded DNA solution and we set the value of absorption at 260 nanometers to be 1 unit, when we denature the DNA, this value increases by 37%. So when we measure the absorption value of a single-stranded DNA molecule, the unit will be 1.37 if the initial unit was set as 1 unit. So we see there is a 37% increase in the absorption when we convert a double-stranded DNA into a single-stranded form. Further, if we hydrolyze this single-stranded molecule, we are breaking the bond between the sugar and the phosphates, the bond between the base and the sugar, that is a covalent bond, is broken. The beta glycosidic bond between sugar and base is broken. The phosphodiester bond between the phosphate groups and sugar is broken. We get the free nitrogenous bases after hydrolysis. So when we measure the absorption value of these free nitrogenous bases in solution, the value increases by 60%. So if you have set the initial value to be 1 unit, the final value will become 1.60. So we can find out whether we have a sample of denatured DNA or whether we have a sample of double-stranded DNA by the property of absorption. Now we can also find out the concentration of nucleic acid in solution. How to find out the concentration of nucleic acid in solution? To find out the concentration of nucleic acid in solution, we will apply this formula, that is absorption at 260 nanometers. We have to minus the absorption at 320 nanometers. So we have a solution. We will measure the absorption value at 260 nanometers. We also measure the absorption value at 320 nanometers. Now why 320? Because absorption at 320 nanometers tells us about the turbidity that is present in the nucleic acid solution. And that turbidity could be a possible contamination. So we need to subtract the absorption at 320 nanometers from absorption at 260 nanometers. So our final absorption value multiplied by the dilution factor multiplied by 50 micrograms per ml. So a pure double-stranded DNA molecule of concentration 50 micrograms per ml gives us the absorption value of 1 unit. So this is the standard that we are taking here, is a pure double-stranded DNA molecule of 50 micrograms per ml. The absorption value at 260 nanometers is 1 unit. So this value multiplied by the dilution factor multiplied by the final absorption, that is absorption at 260 minus absorption at 320, gives us a concentration of nucleic acid in a solution in micrograms per ml. Now this property of absorption, apart from concentration, we can also find out the yield of nucleic acid in solution. How to find out the yield of nucleic acid in solution? Once you get the concentration in micrograms per ml, this concentration you multiply by the total sample volume in ml. So concentration in micrograms per ml multiplied by the total sample volume in ml gives us a yield in micrograms. So we can use this property of absorption to find out the concentration of nucleic acid in solution. We can use it to find out the yield of nucleic acid in solution. Now suppose you have an unknown concentration of DNA and you need to find out the concentration of that unknown DNA in the solution that you are provided. Now for this you will be requiring a standard curve. Now what is a standard curve? On the x-axis you will plot the concentrations, and these concentrations are known. So on the x-axis we plot known concentrations of the DNA sample. On the y-axis we plot the absorption value. So on the y-axis we are plotting absorbance, on the x-axis we are plotting concentration, and we plot a curve with the line passing through the origin. This curve is known as a standard curve. Now if I give you a solution and I ask you to find out the concentration of the DNA in this sample, you will use the property of absorption. You will find out the value of absorption at 260 nanometers minus the contaminations. You plot this absorption value on the standard curve that you have prepared, and this standard curve you plot the absorption value here and you extrapolate this value to the x-axis. Now on the x-axis this point will give you the concentration. So this point will be the concentration of the unknown DNA sample. Now absorption value apart from concentration and yield can also be used to find out the purity of a nucleic acid sample. Now when we extract nucleic acids, it might be contaminated with proteins, it might be contaminated with the organic or other compounds that we are using for the extraction purpose. We deproteinize the sample using phenol or using phenol chloroform. So those organic reagents might be remaining in the final preparation, and you need to check whether the extract is pure or not. So this absorption property can also be used to figure out whether your sample is pure or it is contaminated. Now some samples have a protein contamination. We deproteinize the sample using proteases and phenol and other reagents, but still it might be contaminated with proteins. So how to check whether your DNA RNA sample is pure or it is contaminated with proteins? We can use the property of absorption. So to find out the purity, we check the absorption at 260 nanometers. That is a property of nitrogenous bases. They give us maximum absorption value at 260 nanometers. Proteins, on the other hand, give us a maximum absorption value at 280 nanometers. So if we find out the ratio between absorption at 260 nanometers and absorption at 280 nanometers, we can find out the purity of the given nucleic acid sample. Now 260 nanometer absorption, again you need to subtract the absorption that you're getting at 320 nanometers. If your sample is turbid, there might be contamination in the sample. You need to check for the turbidity of your nucleic acid sample. Turbidity can be checked at 320 nanometers. The absorption at 260 nanometers, a final value will be absorption at 260 nanometers minus the absorption at 320 nanometers. Similarly, absorption at 280 nanometers, which we are checking for protein contamination, minus the absorption at 320 nanometers give us the final value at 280 nanometers. Now when we divide these two values, we should get a ratio that could be between 1.7 and 2. So ratio should be between 1.7 and 2. If the ratio falls in between this range, we state that our sample is pure. But that doesn't mean if you get it 1.6 it is impure, but you will say that it is almost pure sample, but pure when you get it between 1.7 and 2. Now as the protein contamination in the sample increases, the absorption value at 280 nanometer will also increase. So if the denominator increases, the ratio will decrease. So as you go away from 1.7, below 1.7 you go to 1.5, 1.4, the more is the contamination in your sample. So 1.7 to 2 is pure, 1.6 is fairly pure sample. Below 1.6, that means it has impurity of proteins. Now as I said, there can be other impurities also. There can be organic reagents, there can be chiotropic salts present in the sample. To check for these impurities, again we use the property of absorption. We can check the absorption at 260 nanometers minus the value for turbidity, and we check the absorption at 230 nanometers, at which the organic reagents and the chiotropic salts, they give us the absorption value. We divide these two values, we get a ratio. If the ratio is more than 1.5, we say that our sample is pure. As the contaminations will increase, the absorption value at 230 nanometers will also increase. So if this value increases, the ratio will decrease. As you go far down from 1.5, more is the impurity present in your sample. So absorption property of nucleic acids can be used to find out the concentration of nucleic acid in a solution. You can find out the yield, you can find out the purity of nucleic acids. The second property that we'll be discussing here is density. Now density, cesium chloride density gradient centrifugation can be used to find out the density of the given DNA sample. The density gradient centrifugation is a technique that is used to separate substances on the basis of their size, shape and density. Now this technique of cesium chloride density gradient centrifugation was developed by Michelson and Stahl. So Michelson and Stahl invented isopycnic centrifugation, which is a type of density gradient centrifugation using cesium chloride. Now under high centrifugal force, how much centrifugal force? At least 50,000 RPM. So 50,000 to 100,000 RPM is used, and the sample is centrifuged for at least 10 hours. So if you centrifuge a sample at very high speed for about 10 to 12 hours, you can separate the sample according to their density as various bands in the centrifugal tube. Now what happens is that under high centrifugal force, a solution of cesium chloride molecules will dissociate. The heavy cesium atoms will be forced away from the center towards the outer end of the tube, but will at the same time diffuse back towards the top of the tube, thus forming a shallow density gradient. DNA molecules which are placed in this gradient will migrate to the point where they have the same density as the gradient. Now this gradient is sufficient to separate the types of DNA which have slight differences in density that could be due to differing GC content. A DNA with high GC content is more dense as compared to DNA with high AT content. So if there is a slight difference in the GC content of DNA, or there is a difference in the physical form of DNA, the DNA could be linear, it could be circular, all these differences can be found out using the cesium chloride density gradient centrifugation. So the sedimentation velocity in this case depends upon the density of a molecule, and it depends upon the shape of the molecule. More dense molecules will sediment faster. More compact molecules will sediment faster. So more dense is a molecule, more globular is a molecule, will sediment faster. So by the cesium chloride density gradient centrifugation, what has been found is that the RNA molecules are very dense molecules. So they form a band lower down in the centrifugal tube, giving a density of approximately 1.8 grams per centimeter cube. DNA gives us a density of approximately 1.7 gram per centimeter cube. This will vary according to its physical form. It will also vary according to the GC or AT content of the sample. Proteins are found floating on the top of the tube. So they have the minimum density, that is about 1.55 gram per centimeter cube. With respect to DNA and RNA, they are less dense molecules. Now this property of density can be used to estimate the GC content in a DNA molecule. GC base pairs are more dense than AT base pairs. GC are bonded together by 3 hydrogen bonds as compared to AT, which have 2 hydrogen bonds. Therefore, DNA with more GC base pair form bands lower down on the centrifugal tube as compared to the equal number of base pairs with high AT content. So we can estimate whether our DNA sample has high GC content or high AT content by this density gradient centrifugation technique. Second function or second application of this technique can be to show existence of highly repetitive DNA sequences. Now, a genome can broadly be divided into 3 parts. We have the unique DNA sequences or the single copy sequences, which are mostly the coding sequences of DNA. Then we have the moderately repetitive or the intermediate repetitive DNA sequences, which are moderately repeated in the genome. And there are highly repetitive DNA sequences, which are very small sequences repeated millions of times in the genome. So how many highly repetitive DNA sequences are present in the sample can also be found out by the density gradient centrifugation technique. Now what is done here is the chromosomal DNA is cut into equal size pieces, and then they are subjected to cesium chloride density gradient centrifugation. 2 bands are formed. One band contains most of the DNA of the genome. The second band contains about 5% of DNA from the genome, and this is the band for the highly repetitive DNA sequences. The second band is also known as the satellite DNA bands. So density can be used to estimate the GC content of a given DNA sample. It can also be used to find out the highly repetitive DNA present in the sample. Thank you.